All right. Good morning, everyone. So as Rich said, developing the consciousness to see the absolute and the spiritual truth in all things. In all things. That can be a challenge sometimes, to see the spiritual truth in all things. So we're midway into January, the month where we traditionally return to our Science of Mind roots, and we explore the first 4 pre-chapter chapters. And they comprise, of course, the introduction of the Science of Mind textbook. And they are entitled The Thing Itself, The Way It Works, What It Does, and How to Use It. And as I've said each week, we're doing that-ish a little bit, because we're pulling in from each of these, but we're not focusing just on that. But the thing that I wanted to focus on are the terms that are included in that. We're looking at the language of Science of Mind and the concepts that are contained within them. So for those of you who have the textbook, how many have the textbook? Okay, I really highly...
more than one.
How many? I highly encourage you to read these pre-chapters. It's only a total of 35 pages. And it's actually pretty easy just to sit down and... It could be a class, yes. I like that. Actually, that's another idea we have there. So sometimes the terms and the concepts that are found in our Science of Mind teaching sound like they have their own language. I know when I first started, I couldn't grasp all the different names for God. It was so many different terms, and that's why classwork really is good, because you get very familiar with the interchangeability of a lot of the terms. So this month, I'm going to take a little time to make sure that we do understand this language. And if that weren't enough, we are going to add a couple of new terms and discover how they bring, we're going to discover how we bring it all alive in our lives. So last Sunday, we added a new word to our Science of Mind vocabulary. Who remembers what last week was?
Eugenia does. What was it, Eugenia? The word last week.
Pronoia.
That's right.
What is it?
The word is pronoia, and we all became proanoid. So, who can tell me the definition, the full definition of pronoia? What's the full definition?
Is it the opposite of paranoia?
That's sort of, yeah, it is.
It's the opposite of paranoid, but it is a true belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor. But the word that's so important in that sentence is true. The true belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor. Here. Yeah. Okay. And as I said last week, being proanoid is having faith in an infinite possibility and its desires and its ability to do for us all that we shall ever need to have done. And that was a quote from Ernest Holmes on page 46 of The Science of Mind. Today we explore some more religious science speak, and there's also a really great little book, How to Speak Religious Science, but that's another talk. And we're going to do that in our talk today. So first, we will break down the 3 concepts here, and then we're going to put it all back together with some kind of fun examples. So first, consciousness. If you were here this last summer, and I know that was a really, really long time ago, we spent a Sunday exploring consciousness. Actually, I think we spend almost every Sunday exploring consciousness, but specifically, we define consciousness as the totality of our beingness that we bring to the table of our lives. The totality, yes. Oh, okay. The totality of our beingness that we bring to the table of our lives. And that totality consists of certain elements. So how many certain elements? 8. 8 elements. There are 8 elements that come together to comprise our consciousness. So think for a moment. Can anybody tell me what those 8 are?
Did you tell us last week?
No.
Okay. Then ask me next week.
Last summer we talked about that. All right, we're going to go over the 8. The 8 elements that comprise our consciousness. So we have thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values. It's all sounding familiar now, right?
Yep.
Attitudes, words, actions, and reactions. So those are the 8. Thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions, and reactions. So in order to embody our Science of Mind teachings, in order to bring them fully into our lives, we want to develop our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions, and reactions to see the absolute and the spiritual truth in all things. The absolute and the spiritual truth in all things. So number 2, the absolute. And this begs the question, what is the absolute? What is the absolute? Who wants to take a stab at this? What's the absolute?
The all, everything,
It's really pretty easy.
okay.
It's one word. We use it here all the time.
God,
Ah, that's it. Absolute is simply a synonym for God. For God and everything. Because God is everything.
That's right.
In the glossary of the Science of Mind textbook, Holm defines the absolute as the unconditioned, that which nothing can limit, that which forever transcends any conceivable limitation or determination, unconditional perfection, self-existent, self-sufficient, often used as a synonym for God. So yes, the absolute is just another word for God. And today we are about developing our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions, and reactions to see God and the spiritual truths in all things. So number 3, spiritual truth. Now it's time to define spiritual truth. And there's no better definition than the short line Holmes uses many times in the Science of Mind. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Spiritual truth, perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. That's a good mantra just to say when you need to bring yourself back to your center. In the Science of Mind, Holmes writes, "It is easy to believe that God is perfect. We must also believe that our spiritual nature is perfect. And since it is difficult to believe that outwardly we are perfect, we must confine our statements to a realization of our spiritual perfection. We must remain faithful to this vision for a realization of the presence," and I'll add perfection, "of God, who is the secret power of our work. The spiritual truth is that the perfection of God resides inside each and every one of us. The spiritual perfection of truth and God. The perfection of God resides in me." Turn to someone right now and say, "The perfection of God resides in you."
The perfection of God resides in you.
But it's not just limited to each and every one of us, it's in each and everything. So look around and say, "The perfection of God resides in everything I see. The perfection of God resides in everything I see." Let's take it one more step. The perfection of God is my perfection. This is the spiritual truth of me. The perfection of God is my perfection. This is the spiritual truth of me. Turn to someone and say, "The perfection of God is your perfection. This is the spiritual truth of you." The perfection of God is your perfection. The spiritual truth of you. Look around the room and say, "The perfection of God is everything I see. This is the spiritual truth." The perfection of God is everything I see. This is the spiritual truth. So there it is. So there it is. Today, we are developing our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions, and reactions to see God and the perfection of God in ourselves, in others, and in all things. All things. And that's what today is all about. And actually, that is our life's path. So even bringing these concepts into understandable language, they're still pretty lofty and broad. I want to give you 4 brief, fun examples right now of these ideas brought down to the human experience. Because, as Holmes says, if we cannot prove these teachings in our lives here and now, in this earthly experience that we're having, what good are they? What good are these teachings if we cannot prove them in our lives right here and now? So example number 1. David Sarnoff was an American businessman and a pioneer of American radio and television. Throughout most of his career, he led the Radio Corporation of America, more commonly known as RCA. Stumbling on that word for some reason. And we've all heard of RCA, right? So in 1951, he demanded that his research team develop a mechanical tape recorder for both black and white and color TV. That sounds like ancient stuff, doesn't it? A member of the research team was heard to say, "It's a wonderful thing to have an imagination unhampered by the knowledge of facts." In other words, he felt that the fact was that it could not be done. However, within 5 years, they did indeed do what couldn't be done. So how does that apply to developing the consciousness to see the absolute and the spiritual truth in all things? And I can use our science of mind words now because you know what they mean, right? God's perfection lives in possibilities. God's perfection lives in possibilities. God's perfection lives as our imagination. When we bring our consciousness to God's possibility through our imagination, impossible things become possible. It took the imagination to put us on the moon, didn't it? And then the possibilities followed that. Example number 2, and this is from a Get Fuzzy cartoon. Rob says to his dog, Satchel, "Crud, I forgot I have to work next weekend." "Well, at least my boss won't be in. Every cloud has a silver lining, doesn't it?" Satchel, the dog, says, "What does that mean?" Rob says, like how even in a bad situation there is some good to be found, right? Satchel says, it's like the old dog expression. Rob says, "What's that?" Satchel, "For every trip to the vet, there's a ride in the car." When we see the good in every situation, we raise our vibration level, and what happens? We attract more good to appreciate and be grateful for. In the Science of Mind, Holmes writes, we should be able to look at a discordant fact in the face and deny its reality, since we know its seeming reality is borrowed from illusion. We should be able to look at a wrong condition with the knowledge that we can change it. The realization that we have this ability must be gained by the application of our knowledge. The more we do this, the more we practice this, the more we see it at work. And the more those discordant facts, the more those illusions evaporate and dissipate. But it takes practice. And what's our default? To go back to complaining about the way things are. And wanting things to be different without us putting our positive power to work in this and seeing what could be. We have work to do. And when we bring a new consciousness to whatever we are looking at, whatever we are looking at changes. When we bring a new consciousness to whatever we are looking at, whatever we are looking at changes. And who's going to do this? If not us, if not each and every one of us. Example number 3. Okay, this is an oldie, but it's a goodie, and I know I've told it before, and you'll see what it is. There were twins whose only resemblance to each other was their looks. If one felt it was too hot, the other thought it was too cold. If one said the TV was too loud, the other claimed the volume needed to be turned up. Opposite in every way. The other one was an eternal optimist, and the other one was the doom and gloom pessimist. Just to see what would happen on the twins' birthday, their father loaded the pessimist room with every imaginable toy and game. The optimist room he loaded with horse manure. That night, the father passed the pessimist room and found him sitting amid his new gifts, crying bitterly. "Why are you crying?" the father asked. "Because my friends will be jealous. I'll have to read all these instructions before I can do anything with this stuff. I'll constantly need batteries, and my toys will eventually get broken," answered the pessimistic twin. Passing the optimist twin's room, the father found him dancing for joy in the pile of manure. "What are you so happy about?" he asked, to which the optimist twin replied, "With all this horse manure, there's gotta be a pony in here somewhere." Remember what Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us to do when we're faced with what appears to be the opposite of what we want. What is it we say? We say, "This too is good. This too is God. This too is for me, and I demand to see the blessing." Demand to see the blessing. We must know, we must trust that everything is working for our highest good. And finally, one of my favorites, example 4. There was a woman who woke up one morning and looked in the mirror and noticed that she had only 3 hairs on her head. "Well," she said, "I think I'll braid my hair today." So she did, and she had a wonderful day. The next day she woke up and looked in the mirror and she saw that she only had 2 hairs on her head. "I think I'll part my hair down the middle today." So she did, and she had a grand day. The next day she woke up and looked in the mirror and noticed that she only had one hair on her head. Today I'm going to wear my hair in a ponytail. So she did, and she had a fun day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and noticed that there wasn't a single hair on her head. Yay, she exclaimed, today I don't have to fix my hair. And she went on to have the best day ever. And we too will have the best day ever when we develop our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions, and reactions to see God and the perfection of God in ourselves, in others, and in all things. When we do this, we will live with a license of a higher order of being, to quote Thoreau, and we will be called into our greatest yet to be. And so it is.